On December 24, 1905, in Houston, Texas, a boy was born who they named Howard, who discover how he shaped the future we live in today, filmmaker who shocked the world. Howard's father was not a steady man when it came to earning money. He would try his hand at anything. One day he was passing through a remote area in Houston and saw a black liquid spurting from the ground. Despite it being 1901 and most people not recognizing oil, Howard's father knew what it was and understood its value. He quickly approached the landowner and asked, "I want to buy a piece of land here, is it for sale?" The owner replied, "Yes, how much land do you want?" Howard's father said, "About 7 to 8 hectares in that part." He bought the land for under $20 per hectare, land that was spewing oil. Howard's father's knowledge of oil at that time made him the owner of valuable land, and he stopped doing odd jobs. He established a small oil company on this land and began selling crude oil. Selling crude oil back then wasn't like now, requiring facilities and such. People would come with 20-liter containers to get oil, and the various simple refineries that existed would buy the crude oil, convert it into kerosene. In short, Howard's situation improved, and he met a beautiful woman named Elaine Gano and quickly married her. Elaine had a hidden illness, severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, especially regarding cleanliness. Nevertheless, Elaine became pregnant, and their first son, Howard Hughes Jr., was born. When little Howard turned 3 years old in 1908, his father, Howard Sr., managed to make a significant invention still used in various forms today, the Hughes tool bit, which is a drill bit head. This seemingly small invention revolutionized drilling because it made the process easier and provided access to more reservoirs. This invention made the Howard Hughes family millionaires, and not just ordinary millionaires. You should know that back then, there were no billionaires, because in 1908, someone with $100 million was among the world's elite. So it shows that young Howard Hughes was growing up in a very wealthy family, a family that had distanced itself from their past poverty. As Howard Hughes grew older and entered school, his teachers always complained, saying to his parents whenever they saw them, "This child is extremely frustrating and never listens to anything." Little Howard didn't care about school at all. He wouldn't do any assignment given to him, not because he couldn't understand, but because he simply didn't care. He was so brilliant for his age that at 11 years old, he managed to build a radio from scratch, with nothing. This feat got Howard's picture in the Houston newspaper. It didn't take many months before Howard's picture was in the Houston newspaper again, this time for building a motorized bicycle. Keep in mind, he was still only 11 years old. In short, Howard was an unusual boy. He didn't care about school, and his father didn't press him to take it seriously because he realized his son's mind was working beyond school level. At 14 years old, Howard Hughes Sr. took his son to a boat race, a competition between teams from 2 prestigious American universities, Yale and Harvard. Howard told his son, "I want Harvard to win. If Harvard wins today, I'll give you anything you want." At the end of the day, Harvard was declared the winner. When Harvard won, young Howard went to his father, who asked, "Well, what do you want?" He said, "Give me $5. His father thought, "That's cheap," and gave him the $5. What did he want the $5 for? Because further down the same river, there was a seaplane that would take people for a ride for $5. He gave the $5 and got on the seaplane. Howard Hughes Sr., seeing his son wanted to get on the plane, also said, "I'll give $5 and get on too." They boarded, and the plane took off. When the plane ascended, young Howard's thoughts changed forever, and his focus shifted 100% to airplanes. He no longer thought about bicycles or radios, only airplanes. When they got off the plane, young Howard was no longer the same. He thought to himself, "Flying gives the highest pleasure to humans. I must be able to build a device that can fly on its own." Howard Hughes wrote in his memoirs that the happiest hours of his life were when he was alone, flying. However, Howard's happiness didn't last long because just 2 years later, when Howard was 16, his pregnant mother died during childbirth, and the baby also passed away. Before this sadness could subside, 2 years later, when Howard was 18, his father, Howard Sr., died of a heart attack. Millions of dollars and a large oil company all fell into the hands of 18-year-old Howard Hughes. Howard, who knew nothing about oil, quickly hired a man knowledgeable in the field. He appointed this man, Noah Dietrich, as the CEO of the Texaco Oil Company. Despite his young age, Howard was attentive and realized after a few months that the company was functioning correctly and his choice had been right. Howard had a lot of money at his disposal, but he had no interest in advancing in the oil industry, inventing or innovating. His mind was only on airplanes. He decided to first learn how to fly and then get more involved in aviation. At that time, when there were no flight schools, you had to find someone who knew how and was willing to teach you. So he went to the airport. He found someone with an airplane who agreed to teach him how to fly and let him practice with his plane for $100. Very quickly, Howard Hughes became a skilled pilot. It's quite remarkable. Howard Hughes, despite being very shy, became a mountain of confidence around airplanes and those knowledgeable about them. You couldn't stop him. You wouldn't believe he was the same shy person. He was very upset about his shyness in situations other than aviation, so he decided to solve this issue too. He went to Hollywood and into the film studios asking, "How much will it cost for you to teach me acting?" He thought that if he learned acting, his shyness would disappear. After learning a bit of acting, not only did his shyness vanish, but he also acted in a film, 2 Arabian Nights, which was released in 1927. In short, he learned to pilot, overcame his shyness, acted and played in a film. But still, his mind was on airplanes, thinking, when can I leave these pointless tasks and focus on airplanes? That's when he thought, well, I'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'll make a film about airplanes, and he began working on a film called Hell's Angels. Howard's goal with this film was to make airplanes more famous and known to more people on Earth. So, when making this film, he wasn't thinking about profitability and overspent. A kind of obsession was found in Howard, the obsessive disorder that had paralyzed his mother. But in Howard, it was mild. For example, during filming, if an airplane was slightly tilted for 5 seconds, he would say, "This film is trash, prepare the airplanes, we'll shoot again tomorrow," even though it wasn't a significant issue and could have been easily fixed. Some days he would suddenly halt filming, saying, "The clouds are irregular and the film won't look good." So, a filming that was supposed to take 15 days ended up taking a year. The employees weren't upset because he paid everyone's salary in full. They were happy that a 2-week job lasted a year. And when the film was ready, just when silent cinema was fading and microphones had been invented that could capture sound, Howard Hughes saw that the film was finished but outdated as a silent film. So he said, "Throw that film away, we'll shoot again, this time with sound." The employees thought, "Great, another year of work." In 1930, a single dollar had a lot of value, yet Howard spent $2 million on this film until he was finally satisfied to release it. The film was so well made for its time that everyone said, "We must see it." As a result, it grossed $4 million, covering all of Howard's expenses for 2 years, and even making a profit of $2 million. And Howard achieved his goal. The film made millions of people familiar with airplanes and what they are. Howard Hughes had also become a good filmmaker, because after this film he wrote a screenplay about the life of Al Capone, who was alive and a very famous gangster at the time, and he named it Scarface. The nickname given to Al Capone because his face had been scarred by a knife. Howard Hughes made the film Scarface, which was ready for release in 1932, but Hollywood wouldn't allow it to be shown because it hadn't been censored. It was full of shootings, bloodshed, and violence. Howard Hughes sued Hollywood, arguing that there should be freedom in America and that he should be able to make any film he wanted. The court ruled in his favor, and the film was released everywhere. The film was met with tremendous reception, and these 2 films by Howard Hughes revolutionized Hollywood. Those who had mocked Howard Hughes for spending too much realized that spending paid off. They were no longer afraid to spend millions on a film, because if the film was well produced, it would return several times over. From then on, Hollywood films surpassed those from Europe and Asia in ranking. With the revolution he started in Hollywood filmmaking, Howard Hughes said, "Now let's start a revolution in airplanes." Thank you for watching up to here and exploring the revolution Howard Hughes brought to cinema. Since the video is getting long, we'll pick up the story in part 2 next week. Stay tuned for the astonishing continuation. where we'll dive into his most shocking moments and mysterious finale. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and see you soon.